Okay, I'm doing this one as a little tribute, maybe, and childhood memories and things like that. I don't know if you know what Estes rockets are, or have ever even heard of them, or seen somebody then shoot off these little rockets off these stanzas that they've got that would probably look more like something like this on the left. You can see this girl, she's hooking up a easy level rocketry kit that they make, and they're going to shoot off a rocket. And I just think it's neat that we grew up in an age of rockets. In fact, one thing that they did was they made a scale collection here, which is expanded now somewhat. But when I was a kid, they had the Little John rockets and things that all led up to the Mercury Redstone that has here, that actually has the Gemini type capsule on the top of it and so on that's there. But they also made, man, this thing's in the way terribly. They also made Saturn V versions of them, and they made it to where these models could be tubes put together with connector tubes in between them, and you could shoot it off as a rocket, and its own, would hold itself together, centrifugal force. But whenever it would pop from the first stage engine going off, it would be enough to concuss and push off the top of the thing. Now, if you had a one stage rocket, it was different than a second stage. One that was set up to go for a second stage shot out sparks, and right above it, you always had the second stage placed on there. And so when it lit it, it also lit it, then popped it off, and that got the second stage going. In the one stage rockets, it just had a powder puff, and you put basic wadding right above that, and on the top nose cone piece was a parachute that was all connected to the main body by a little shock elastic cord that they would give you, and you could shoot these things off. And if you use the proper engine that they gave you, you could get them to shoot up pretty fast. But it was kind of like a bottle rocket, if you will. It would shoot just for a second or two and then still climb way up, and then poof as it came down, and then you would chase it down whenever you're a kid. And I have fond memories of us chasing them down across a field. Our house was right on the edge of a back lot that was square, and it held, oh, I don't know, about 8 acres worth of space and 250 yards by some 650 yards. But on the other side of that was a school and playground leading to that, so there was that open area too, and a creek ran diagonally through it that had a bridge that ran over it, and this back field would get mowed somewhat every once in a while, but also there was always a trail, and around our fence that was a square perpendicular to this that had a trail also that led to the bridge that led over, and people used to go through our yard and use it for um, getting to school and stuff every day from our neighborhood, so all the kids that we knew and everything. And that was popular. Got to know a bunch of kids by that, and of course different grades and so on. And with me having an older brother and sister, that left us with quite a bit of the spectrum of it. Anyhow, so we started to get into it, and I don't think we were the first ones. There was some other kid that had one, and my brother found out about it. And of course we were into uh, space stuff from growing up in Apollo, and I talk about this in some of my other videos. But what was neat about the Saturn V, they had this whole rocket right here attached on the top of it, and so it let off one stage, two stage. Now there was two different versions of it. There was the Apollo version, and then there was the Saturn V. The Saturn V actually had 5 engines in the bottom of it, and that there were C5 engines, I think, that you'd used. And then the second stage of it actually used 2 engines, and then a single one on top that was this thing, and they independently had their own parachutes come down from it. Some guy built it in our neighborhood after we got all into this and doing a bunch of it, and as I remember, the tail on this broke off whenever it landed on the very first time he shot it off. I think we only shot it off 3 times that we ever were witness to. But neither here nor there. One of the neatest things that we did was we took not the Mercury Redstone, but the Little John, which was a military. And they had the Pershing missile and this, that, and the other, and then they had the fatter V2 rockets, which you can see the orange and white one that they're right there with that kid, and that is actually the V2 style of rocket, and different ones that are basic rocketry and shapes and stuff that's known. And here they've got a whole little list of them that's new, and it occasionally goes across, and we'll let that go. You can see those little engines that are in the package of that one that's there. But they had a lot of different ones and different styles that you could choose from, decals that went along with them. You can, of course, paint them and do things like this. And at the time, I was making plastic models, and this was an expansion to this. And my dad even knew a man that was making his own handmade radio-controlled airplanes back whenever it was burgeoning. We got to watch and go fly them and do things. But there was also a guy that would come in our same backfield, and he had the airplanes that were on a cable, and you held onto it by a little handle, if you remember, that you'd hold on to, and it had a certain length, and you would go around and around spinning with it, holding it, and he could do all kinds of tricks with them, and it worked off gas. It was the whole brrr, going, and was pretty neat. We found out he made his own, and he had 3 or 4 of them, and he'd bring different ones out at different time. We were shooting off rockets, and they would get to be a thing. Sometimes we were flying kites in the same place, and not too many years before, but different things come about. Well, those little engines that you saw there are really just more like a firework, and you put them plugged up in the bottom of this, and then they had these fuses, and they wanted to make it as much as like real rocketry as they could. And so there was a cabling of wires that was about 10 or 12 foot long, and it hooked up to a sensor switch that was basically a kill switch or an on off that was all normally off, and you had to push the button. It even had a safety little pin that you put in it. Whenever you pushed it down, it wouldn't let the thing go down and make the connection. And you put these little alligator clips onto the edge of this wire that had a coating on it that you had taped into the bottom of one of those engines. And whenever you took the pin out and you call 3, 2, 1 and you hit the button, it would take off. Well, you'd get one of those engines like those that's shown there were like C3s, and they quite often had ones of these that would be made with an insert in the back of it that would take its diameter from being that big around to a little bitty engine. And so you'd use A engines in something as big as some of these, and it would shoot up, but it wouldn't really go that high. I mean, maybe a couple of thousand feet and come back down, and that would be, best case scenario. But what we took to doing was taking, and instead of putting the C2 engine in there, we put the C4 engine in there, and boy, that thing lasted twice as long, and zip, and all of a sudden you could get some of these guys that flew real well to get up into the edge of the clouds. And I remember chasing one across our field, and then on a slightly windy day and putting the wrong engine in it, it shot up into the clouds, and we could barely any of us make it out, and we ended up going 3 neighborhoods over chasing it down and finding it there. And it had gone much, much farther. And we started saying, how many engines will we have to put in the thing to get it to go into space? And of course, that was literally impossible. But we were thinking of it, I thought, well, what if you took C4s and you just took one of these things and filled it up with it, and it just boom, 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 and just kept going and going and going? Is there any way you could get it to do something like that? And so you see this one that looks like a plane that comes with its engines, and I did one that was kind of like that, but it was more streamlined, like the one to the right of it there, and you could shoot it off, but instead of shooting it up at an angle into the wind so it kind of come back at you somewhat, this one you shot at a far angle and it actually flew. And I remember the first time I flew it, I put the smallest engine in as possible boom, and the thing flew a couple 100 yards and did a pretty decent job and didn't break. So I thought that was neat. So I let other people shoot off their stuff, and we plugged in like an A4 instead of an A2 and put it in there, and it got about 40 yards off the thing screaming, and all of a sudden it just shattered into pieces and went crazy. And there we go. There was a project, but I turned that later. I carved the rest of the wings off of it and did something else with it entirely. But it was one that I had bought the pieces of a tube. And what they would do is they send you a kit that was balsa wood, thin pieces, like you used to get those airplanes whenever you were a kid, and they would be pre-cut out, and you had to just pull them out and you'd paint them and do things like that. Well, you'd glue it all together and get it made and have it held with tape, and it would glue well, and then you'd usually do a second gluing at the joints so it had a wider connection point, and let that dry again, and then you'd come back and paint it and then put the stickers on it. That one leaving the left right now, called Green Eggs and Ham, had a clear little cylinder in it, and you could put an egg in it and shoot it off and hope the egg didn't bust whenever you did it. And of course, if things didn't work out good, or if it hit the ground, it would break the egg. But we took one of those, and as I remember, we put crickets in it one time, and that we just caught, and we also put a frog in it one time. And as I remember, the frog time, the secondary pop didn't work, parachute didn't work, and the whole thing powed to the ground. And I don't think the frog really made it too well. But that's neither here nor there. They had another version that would actually go up in the air and take pictures of it. It was a little cheap camera type of thing that was really no good, better than some little Kodak click, click, click onto it. And as the thing shot off, you set a little timer, and and then it would start taking pictures. And so you'd set the timer and tell somebody, okay, you ready to do 3, 2, 1, yeah? And then you'd let the thing go, walk away from it. They 3, 2, 1, shoot the thing up, because it would start taking pictures as it went up. And it wasn't that great of pictures either, but still it was neat that you were doing it. And they had this whole tripod with a rod on it. We ended up making our own. But one of the coolest things we did was we took one of those Little Johns, and before this they had Evil Knievel racers, and I don't know if y'all remember this, but they had this thing that was kind of like SST racers, but it had a wind up, and you put Evil Knievel on it, and he could do all these tricks, and you could make him jump ramps and stuff, and it was all built like him, right? Well, they took Evil Knievel and they sawed his shoulders off of his head like it was just the bust, and they took and glued it onto it, and they went to the trouble of painting it up just like Evil Knievel when he tried to jump the Snake River Canyon. And they had taken the plug out of this so that it was used to use the A size engine, so now it no longer had a size, but that exact size tube was exactly fitting a C size engine. And so what they did was they just put the stick tong onto it to where it holds it and glued it on, and they took and shot this thing off with a C4 engine in it. And as I remember, the first couple of times we were like, man, that thing just screamed and went real far and everything. But one of the times it didn't work out well and it wrecked, and that was the end of the Evil Knievel thing, and that was just in one summer of it. So I guess this is just somewhat memories of my summers or growing up as a kid. But I remember rocketry, and I think it's incredible we grew up during the time that we did here, where people were burgeoning, where you could actually see, industrial revolution all came in and everything else, but there were these people that were playing around with something like this, and they definitely had an idea that, oh sure, you can shoot one with explosives like that V2 right there and have it land over there, but what if you could put people in the thing and shoot it off and they could see the world? Or better yet, if you could make them go into space by putting just something like scuba gear on them, or more enhanced than that. And lo and behold, in a short period of time during my childhood years, we went to space and back, and then now it's become somewhat routine. People look at that like it's nothing, just like they look at the stars like, well, that's nothing. And you think, well, that's nothing. That's the everything. We're but one little speck. In fact, you get far enough away from us, you don't even see our speck. All you see is our sun. In fact, you get far enough and that gets lost in a myriad of specks in just our Milky Way. That's one speck of millions of galaxies that are in the universe. And I remember finding that out when I was a kid and looking through a microscope, but also looking through a telescope when we watched the comet Kohoutek go across, and all these different things, chasing lightning bugs, catching a bunch of butterflies and letting them loose in my room, taking a bunch of flowers that they were getting on and stuff. And I must have had over 20 monarch butterflies in my room. Was just turned off the ceiling fan and went with it. Mom kind of freaked out, but it was neat as hell. Especially when she came in, they were all calm, and as soon as she came in, they all started fluttering, and she was like, what the hell's going on here? Yeah. Thought I had turned into an elf or something freaky. What is going on here? But at that time, we'd all noticed that there was thousands of monarch butterflies coming through that year. We don't see butterflies as much anymore. You don't see bees as much anymore, and I think pesticides are ruining that somewhat. And we're going into a weird chemical age with all that situation too, and it's kind of not the way it used to be. But that's probably for all totally other videos. Anyhow, guys, I know this is kind of weird for most of you and everything, but I thought it was just extremely cool. When we were kids, we were able to make these little kits, and not that you would play like zoom zoom with your hand or anything, but you could light this thing off and it would go, and they would crackle and pop, and you could get multiple stages and get these things up to real high. And I don't know if anybody's seen it lately or not, but now they've got people who've taken this far far into the next realm, and they've gotten these super engines and these things, and they actually have gotten them on the edge of space, and they know now that they can just hook them up and really easily get them into space. But you have to get all these permits and things, and God knows where it's going to land. You can't be like that. So, and some of them have been pretty huge. Not that they would take a person up, but they could sure take a cat or a small dog on that ride that they go on. They take them out in the Mojave Desert and stuff, and places like that, and salt flats, and get them together in groups of them and shoot them off. My brother doesn't really do that, but my brother grew up through this, and he always, we were all into space, and you think something like this is just some kid's toy, but my brother ended up being a rocket scientist. It's what he does now to this day. And so some things from childhood can get stuck and lead you down a path that is never ending, but that you had from a real early childhood. My earliest memories are of him and us playing around, but also knowing that Apollo went on. In fact, there's this one where I cut my foot and so on that I have memories of, but that was us playing outside in between them, gonna show the Loon landing on TV, and Mom's making dinner. And a lot comes from that and that whole time. So I'll just share a little bit, and if y'all have ever seen or done Estes rockets, hey, put something down in the comment what you remember, or one that you built. But there was a lot of them. I'm sure there's ones I didn't mention. There's the egg, there's the camera, and stuff that they had of ancient times. They have a new Mars destination longship for the new one that's out there, and a few of these oddities they have. And this is only the new tab I clicked on, where they have like all these different kits. I still see them to this day in stores and stuff, and right near the models sometimes, and some of the easier kits, and some that are a little more advanced sometimes, but that's about it. Not the biggest selection that you could get from Estes itself, but you can see them in Walmart, all kinds of places. In fact, when I was grown up, I got to do it again for my nephew whenever he was growing up, and we actually built one, did a whole thing. I told him we were going to shoot it off and did the whole 9 yards and everything, and then we ended up doing it. It was pretty fun. Something I'll never forget, and he'll probably never forget either. But onward we go. Peace. Enjoy.